Tonight, go outside and look up. Just for a moment. No phone, no screen. Just you and the sky. And if you're somewhere dark enough, you'll see thousands of points of light scattered across the black. You'll probably glance at them for a few seconds, think that's nice, and go back inside. But for most of human history, that sky wasn't background scenery. It was the most important thing in the world. It was a clock, a calendar, a map, a god, a warning, and a story all at once. And every single civilization that has ever existed on this planet, without exception, became completely obsessed with it. That's not a coincidence, that's a clue. The oldest structure humanity has ever found isn't a palace. It isn't a temple. It isn't a city wall. It's a circle of carved stone pillars in southern Turkey called Göbekli Tepe, built over 11,000 years ago, roughly 6,000 years before Stonehenge, 7,000 years before the pyramids. Archaeologists who excavated it expected to find signs of a settlement nearby, homes, tools, evidence of daily life. They found almost nothing. What they found instead was a monument, a place people traveled to deliberately from across the region, apparently for the sole purpose of watching and marking what was happening in the sky above them. The oldest building we know of was essentially an ancient observatory. Humans were building monuments to the stars before they were building houses to live in. Let that sit for a second. Why? What was it about the sky that made it so urgent, so consuming, that it became the first thing our ancestors decided to build permanent structures around? The answer isn't mystical, it's practical. And once you understand it, the obsession makes complete sense. For ancient humans, the sky was the only reliable source of information about time. Not time in the abstract sense, not hours and minutes, but time in the sense that actually mattered. When to plant, when to harvest, when the rains would come, when the rivers would flood, when the cold would arrive, when the animals would migrate. Life and death, starvation and abundance, depended entirely on knowing where you were in the cycle of the year. And the sky told you exactly where you were, every single night, with perfect consistency. The stars don't lie, they don't change. They don't forget. Every year, without fail, the same stars rise and set at the same points on the horizon at the same time of year. Orion appears in the east in winter. The Pleiades rise in spring. Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, rose just before dawn on the horizon in ancient Egypt at exactly the same moment every year that the Nile began to flood. This was not a coincidence the Egyptians discovered and then forgot about. They built an entire civilization around it. The flooding of the Nile was the single most important agricultural event in Egyptian life, and a star told them it was coming every year on schedule, without fail. They didn't worship the star because they were primitive. They worshipped it because it was genuinely, practically, life-savingly reliable in a world where almost nothing else was. This is what modern people miss when they look at ancient astronomical obsession and see superstition. They're seeing the wrong thing. What these civilizations had built, through generations of careful observation and record-keeping, was the world's first scientific instrument. The sky was their data. The monuments were their measuring tools. The priests and astronomers were their scientists. And the stakes were not abstract. They were survival. The Babylonians tracked the movements of the planets with a precision that still impresses modern astronomers. They identified the 5 visible planets thousands of years before telescopes existed. They calculated the length of the year to within minutes of the actual figure. They predicted eclipses. Not because they were interested in astronomy as an intellectual exercise, but because eclipses terrified people, destabilized rulers, caused panic, and the ability to predict one, to stand in front of a crowd and say the sun will go dark at midday tomorrow and it will return, because we know was one of the most powerful things a human being could do. Knowledge of the sky was power, always, in every culture, without exception. The Mayans took this to a level that remains staggering. Their astronomical records, compiled over centuries of naked eye observation, tracked the movements of Venus to an accuracy of 1 day in 500 years. 1 day in 500 years. With no telescopes, no computers, no electronic instruments of any kind, just human eyes, patience, stone, and the desperate need to understand the patterns above them. The Mayan calendar, which gets misquoted and misunderstood endlessly in popular culture, was not a prophecy. It was a precision instrument for tracking interlocking astronomical cycles, some of them spanning thousands of years. It was arguably the most sophisticated timekeeping system developed anywhere on Earth before the modern era. And then there's Stonehenge, which most people know about, but almost no one fully understands. The stones aren't random. The entire structure is aligned with extraordinary precision to the rising of the sun at the summer solstice and the setting of the sun at the winter solstice. This required its builders, who had no written language, no metal tools, and no wheeled vehicles, to transport stones weighing up to 25 tons from a quarry 25 miles away, and to position them with an accuracy measured in fractions of a degree. This was not a casual project. This was an obsession. A multi-generational, civilization-defining commitment to marking the sky, permanently in stone, so that the knowledge could never be lost. Why did the winter solstice matter so much? Because it was the turning point, the longest night of the year, the moment after which the days begin to get longer again. For people living without electric light, without heated homes, without guaranteed food storage, the slow return of the sun after the darkest night of the year was not a poetic metaphor. It was a matter of survival, knowing exactly when it was coming, not guessing, not hoping, but knowing, with the certainty that only careful astronomical tracking could provide, meant the difference between despair and reassurance, between a community that panicked and a community that held together. The sky gave people something even more valuable than agricultural information. It gave them certainty in a world that was otherwise completely uncertain. Predators, disease, drought, flood, famine, all of these could arrive without warning and without mercy. But the stars were always there, always in the same place, always on schedule. They were the one thing in the ancient world that could be trusted absolutely, and that reliability, that mathematical cosmic consistency, became the foundation on which ancient people built their understanding of order itself. Gods lived in the sky for a reason. Not because ancient people were foolish enough to think supernatural beings lived in the clouds, but because the sky was where order came from, where the patterns were, where the reliable, knowable, consistent logic of the universe was visible every clear night. To look up was to see evidence that the universe had rules. And that was, for our ancestors, the most comforting and the most terrifying thing imaginable. Comforting because rules meant predictability. Terrifying because rules meant something had made them. Every culture connected the sky to their deepest questions about existence. The Greeks saw their myths written in the constellations, stories about heroes, monsters, gods, and consequences, projected onto the dark so they could be read and remembered by anyone who looked up. The Aboriginal Australians developed one of the longest continuous astronomical traditions in human history, stretching back over 50,000 years, using the positions of stars to navigate, to time ceremonial events, and to track the seasons of different food sources. The Polynesian navigators crossed the Pacific Ocean, the largest body of water on Earth, without instruments, guided entirely by the stars, the waves, and the wind, memorizing a mental map of the sky so precise they could find a speck of land thousands of miles away in open ocean. These were not primitive people who hadn't discovered science yet. These were people who had developed an intimate, detailed, working knowledge of the most complex natural system visible to the naked eye, and had built their entire cultures around what they learned from it. And here's the thing that should make you stop and feel something. When you look up at the night sky tonight, you're looking at the exact same sky, the same stars, the same patterns, the same slow wheel of constellations turning through the year. Your ancestors looked at this and saw a clock, a calendar, a compass, a temple, a story, and a god. You look at it and see a nice view. The sky didn't change, something else did. The ancient obsession with the sky wasn't a phase humanity grew out of because it was wrong. It was a phase humanity moved past because we built other tools to do what the sky used to do. Clocks replaced the sun, calendars replaced the stars, GPS replaced the constellations. The knowledge got encoded into machines, and we stopped needing to look up to access it. But the wonder, the original impulse that built Göbekli Tepe and Stonehenge and the Mayan observatories and the Egyptian temples, that impulse didn't go anywhere. It just lost its practical outlet, which is why when you do go outside on a clear night and actually look up, something stirs, something older than language, older than cities, older than writing. A faint echo of the mind that first noticed the stars were moving in patterns and understood, dimly and then more clearly, that the universe was not chaos, that there was order up there, that it could be known. Your ancestors spent 300,000 years looking up at that sky and learning everything it had to teach them. You carry all of that curiosity in you. You always have. You just don't need it anymore. Or maybe you do, and you just forgot to look up.